Hello, I'm Rex Schaldhaus, and I love model railroading. I do a lot of it. I do it as often as I can, along with many other things. And I've been asked numerous times the difference between scale and gauge, and quite honestly, in model railroading, they're used interchangeably without really serious issues. I'm going to clarify it and a few other terms probably along the way. So first of all, what is scale? Scale is taking the real version of this guy and taking him down from as big as he was running on live real rails hauling passengers and cargo, bringing him down to this size. This is N. This is, so I look at my cheat sheet, this is it's kind of variable. It's 1 to 148 or 1 to 160. So it's 1 inch of this guy is equal to 148 inches in real life, or 1 inch in this guy is equal to 160 inches in real life. Whatever, it makes very small stuff. I play with N. I think it's a little small. It's for the person who likes to work with very small things. I go through from N to HO, to S scale, which is also called American Flyer, to O scale, which is also called a Lionel scale, to G, which is also called Garden scale. And Garden scale is this guy here. And this guy's fairly heavy, fairly awkward to hold. He's got a lot of little moving parts on him. It's an Aristocraft. It's a really cool model train, and I really like it. So scale takes these guys from real life down to model railroad size. That's scale, and it's in ratios 1 to 600, 1 to 100, whatever. Gauge is the distance between tracks, and gauge varies with what particular scale you're operating with, so to speak. So this is American Flyer S scale, and it's S gauge, however you want to do it, and we'll get into that. And this is N scale and gauge, because they're almost interchangeable. This is G Garden, HO, and the last one I'm grabbing is Lionel, American Lionel O gauge, and we're going to explain this. And I've got another video that talks about why these tracks are different and why their transformers are different. So let's jump into the individual pictures of the engines and the track, and educate you onto what those various things really mean. Starting at the bottom and working our way up, remember that gauge is the distance between the rails of the track, and scale is the relationship in size of the rolling stock in model form to real life form. In the very bottom of this photo is N gauge track, and we're going to get into it later, but N gauge track is about 9 millimeters or 0.354 inches apart. The one above that is HO, and HO is also half O scale, is what it stands for, 16.5 millimeters or 0.65 inches apart. Then we have S scale, also called American Flyer scale, and S scale is S gauge is 22.45 millimeters apart or 0.885 inches apart. Above that we have the 3-rail and the first and only AC system I have, O, also called Lionel scale. It's the only AC system I have, and its track is the gauge on its track is 31.75 millimeters or 1.25 inches. And above that we have G scale, which is also G gauge track, which is also called Garden
track, garden scale, garden gauge, and it is 45 millimeters or 1.75 inches apart. As I said, the only track I have that's AC is the O or Lionel, that one on the gray base. Everything else is DC, and that makes it nice. I have no Z scale, which is the smallest commercially available scale. Its scale is 1 to 220. Its track is 6.5 millimeters apart, or 0.256 inches, a little bit over a quarter of an inch. It's too small for me. It's a two-rail system. Every one I've seen is DC powered. It's even smaller than what we're seeing on the screen, which is N scale. And N scale rides on N gauge track, and N scale is kind of inconsistent, 1 to 148 or 1 to 160, and if you look behind it, this model is just over 2 inches long. That's why I've got rulers in all these photos. N is normally a two-rail system. Every one I've seen is DC powered, and they're fun to deal with. They're a little bit small for younger children. I'm going to say just magically up around the age of 12, 13, then they can start handling this. Below that, just a little small, just a little young in my opinion. HO scale, which is half O scale, that's what it stands for, is 1 to 87 in relationship between the models and the real things. And the track is 16.5 millimeters apart, or 0.65 inches apart. It's fairly small. Everyone I've seen is on a two-rail DC system, and this is probably one of the two most popular scales available today. The two most popular, in my opinion, being HO and O, and they're great starter sets for children that are in the say 9 to 10 year old range, and this is actually one of my favorite engines, GP7, Electromotive Division GP7, and there's a history behind me owning Jeep 7s. This is a fun run, a fun train to run. It's a fun scale to run, and there's a lot of versatility, a lot of flexibility in its design. This is S scale, also called American Flyer scale. Occasionally called O27 to be slightly confused with O gauge and O scale out of Lionel. It is 1/64th, and this one here has a history behind it. This is a locomotive I was given, a train set I was given when I was about 12 years old, 10 years old. My brothers and I were given this. It's gone through many, many floods. It's been damaged. It needs to be fixed. I haven't had time. I haven't had the resources. I'm working on other trains. The gauge on this is 22.45 millimeters apart, or 0.885 inches apart. Every one I've ever seen is a two-rail DC system, and this one here, I have dreams of getting it up and running. And Northwestern, which is two words, is actually a rail company that's from my hometown of Chicago. So this one has some special meaning for it. This was very popular in the 50s and 60s, and since then the scale has died, with O and HO taking over the majority of the scales. This Lionel F7, besides being made historical in the movie City of New Orleans, is a train that was given to my brothers and me probably 1958-59 time frame, and it was used at that time. It's an early 1950s Lionel product, and it runs on obviously O scale track, O gauge track, which is the scale on this is 1 to 48. And it's frequently referred to as the Lionel scale, Lionel gauge. It's the only AC system I have. The three rails, the center rail is considered the hot rail. The outer two rails are considered the neutral rails. And this track to gauge is 31.75 millimeters apart, or 1.25 inches. And there are two rail O gauge systems out there. They're DC as far as I know. I don't own one. This train here has been through numerous floods. I've had it for a long time. I love it. It's a monster. It's a workhorse, and when it rolls on the train board, it thunders. It's a beautiful train. It's one of the two most popular gauges, scales or gauges, however you want to phrase it, HO and O. This is my monster. It is a G scale system, so it runs on G gauge track. Its ratio for scale is 1 to 22.5, and the track is 45 millimeters or 1.75 inches apart. It's every system I've seen for G scale is DC powered 2-rail systems, and this is my monster. This guy needs a little bit of work too. He is also the fastest train I have. This guy is so fast that I can derail him at any time I want. At the introduction of a curve, this guy will outspeed anything else I've got on my train set without a problem. And it's a circus train. I believe its manufacture is in the early 1950s by Aristocraft, and it's just a fun train. It's a big train. The only way I can set it up is on the floor. I have no board big enough to take this because the radius of the curves is greater than 24 inches, so the diameter of the curve is bigger than 48, so it will not fit on a 4x8 sheet of plywood. It's a monster, and it's fun to run. It's fun to watch this thing operate because it's so big. If you thought O scale was big, walk over and see G scale. G scale's fun. So they go from Z, being the smallest, smaller than I would ever consider buying, to N, which is pretty small and needs a more mature person to operate with, to HO, which is half O, to S. From S, it goes to O, also called Lionel scale, to G, which is also called garden scale. And the tracks are, the distance between the tracks is the gauge. The size, the relationship of the model to the real thing is the scale. And I've probably interchanged them numerous times during the audio. That's the thing I do. I'm not real sensitive about the difference between scale and gauge, because if I'm operating HO scale track, HO gauge track, I'm running HO scale rolling stock. So it doesn't make a lot of difference to me, but some guys will get real technical with you and criticize you for it. I don't. To me, they're interchangeable. To stress the relationship of scale, ratios of the models to the real thing, here is a photo of the engines we've been using. The smallest one, the little black steamer, is my N gauge, my N scale. The Santa Fe next to it, the Jeep 7, Electromotive Division GP7, is my HO. The one behind it, which I believe is also an EMD product, I'm not sure which version, is my S scale, my American Flyer scale. The F7 behind it, an Electromotive Division F7, is O, or Lionel scale, and that monster steamer in the back is my G, or garden scale. So there's a few bits of history in here. First of all, the first new train set I ever received, I got to pick out, and it was in the warehouse buildings that the Pullman Car Company had operated in when they were building Pullman cars in the south side of Chicago. And it was an Atlas Tyco system with a Jeep 7, which is, this is my number 2 because I now own 3 of them. My number 1 is preserved. I still do run it. It's just in a very well protected box. So that Santa Fe has a history with me. That's because it's the first new train I received model railroad, and I've kept it. It's now 60 years old and it still runs. The Northwestern behind it, was a train I received, my brothers and I received when I was probably 10 years old. It's been through a number of floods. It's been damaged to whatever else. I need to restore it or try to get it running. The F7, the Electromotive Division F7, the Illinois Central, behind the Northwestern, we received used when I was probably 8-10 years old. It's a 1950s, early 1950s production by Lionel. It's a monster. I love it. I keep it running. I've done repairs on it numerous times. And then the Aristocraft circus train in the background. So several of these trains have histories with me. I intend to keep them. I intend to keep them running. I intend to pass them down to my granddaughter, who also loves trains, and we ride the Disney trains at Disneyland all the time, the real live steam trains up there. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you have a better understanding for scale, which is the relationship of the model size to the real thing, and gauge, which is the distance between the track. I use them interchangeably. I'm not offended by it. I'm not offended by other people who interchange them as well. Thanks for watching.